let's just be ready.
Yeah.
I'm gonna start with a few slides.
Okay.
And then we'll just switch.
Okay. Okay, sounds good.
All right.
Okay, perfect.
And remind me, you don't have sound.
No sound, correct, yeah. Great. Okay.
All right. Hello, hello. Yeah, this one. Hello, hello, hello. Hi, everyone. Hello, hello. Have a seat. We are about to get started. Come on, friends. Have a seat. All right.
What?
What did you do?
The sound.
Okay. All right, perfect. Hi, everyone. So I like to start with a very simple question. Who is here for the first time? All right, we're getting better. Less than 50%. Okay, I'm glad. So my name is Cyril. I'm part of the AI user group, and I'm going to be your host tonight. So for the new comers, AI user group is a community of professionals, and we are trying to show you the latest AI tools for you to be able to build. We do AI for developers, so that's the event you are here tonight for. We also do AI for marketers and AI for designers. So if you're interested in other topics, check us out. We are on Luma. All the events are there, so you can also join other events. We usually have one meetup a week, and it's usually on Wednesdays. So for today, this is the agenda, if that works. Okay, it's not working, that's great. Not sure what's going on. Since when a slideshow is not working? That's new, it's a new bug. Okay, cool, here we go. So we're gonna start with Emily. So we're gonna talk a lot about Eval tonight. So Eval maybe how Eval support faster, more confident LLM development. Then Gokhan, we talk about building and fine-tuning a fun called demo. And then Ivan will present agent evaluation on Vertex AI. Then at 8 p.m. we have a community mic. So basically it's your turn to come on stage and present whatever you want to the community. Usually we present like job opportunities. So if you are offering a job, if you are looking for a job, don't be shy. Sometimes some people come and talk to me after and say like they would like to present because they are looking for a job. If you're looking for a job, this is your time. Come and present yourself to the community. Also, if you're working on something new and you would like to have beta tester, it's a great time to come and present what you are working on so the community can know about it and you can find your first user there. So it's gonna be at 8 p.m. so you have time to think about what you want to present. And then at 8, right after that, we're gonna have pizza and some time for networking. Now, this is a community event, so the content is also coming from the community. So if you are working on anything interesting, you implemented AI, you implemented some tools, you learned something that you think it's worth sharing, please come and talk to me, and you'll come on the other side and present what you discovered. So that's that for my part. Now we have our partner DataStax. They are working on a very cool event. They want to tell you about that right now.
Everybody, thanks. I'm Greg Stacknick. I work at DataStax on the product team, and just wanted to give you guys a heads up about an event that we're running called Hacking Agents. It's a virtual event, and we have a number of speakers coming in to talk about kind of agentic workflows. We'll have a lot of examples for you to kind of build agents together collaboratively. We've got speakers coming in from obviously DataStax. We've got folks coming in from Athena, Samba Nova, as well as NVIDIA. And so we'd love to see you there. We'll also be doing demos on the side over there of our AI development platform. We'll be doing some demos using Langflow, using our vector database, things like that. So if you're interested, details are right there on January 30th. Cool, thanks.
Awesome. And Emily will be our first speaker.
Hear me? Oh, there we go. Now, okay. I can hear myself better, so I hope you can hear me. I'm going to do a little screen wrangling for a second, so bear with me. We're going to not mirror, going rogue. I'm going to pull this over. This is riveting, I know. Thank you. Okay. All right. Let's start this. Oh, wait. I think I did this wrong. Sorry, everybody. Here we go. There we go. All right, thanks. I am Emily Shenfield. So nice to see you all. Thanks for coming out. And I work at Twilio as a technical marketing engineer that basically translates in my day-to-day to something like a developer evangelism role, developer relations. If you're interested in learning more about that type of work, I'm always happy to talk about that. But I'm here today to talk to you about evals, evaluations, and broadly how we think about using evals at Twilio in our own development of a product called Twilio AI Assistants, which I'll talk to you a little bit about later. But before I dive into that, if you've heard of Twilio as a developer, I think it's probably likely that if you've used Twilio or heard of us, you've heard of our communications APIs, right? Probably messaging, voice. And that's still a core part of Twilio's business. That's still our bread and butter, I would say. But Twilio does many things beyond that, in fact, and we are a customer engagement platform. That means any place that your business is talking to customers, Twilio has a platform and building blocks to help you as developers kind of build a better experience for your customer. And so given that kind of expertise and experience with communications, and the team that I work on, which is the emerging tech and innovation team at Twilio, we looked at those communications and we said, well, this seems like a right place to kind of think about conversational AI, right? And so in the last year, my team, which is focused primarily on research and thinking about the kind of 3 to 5 year time horizon of Twilio's product roadmap, we thought, well, let's see what happens if we apply conversational AI to this kind of customer engagement space. And as part of that, we started a program called Twilio Alpha, which is our channel for distributing and sharing our research with developers, with users, to get feedback and kind of start the research process really early so that we can get your feedback to build better products 2 to 3 years down the line. As part of this program, Twilio Alpha, we made a bet and said, let's build a platform for creating AI agents that work with your conversational customer engagement strategy. And thus, Twilio AI Assistants was born. Turns out people really liked it. We had a lot of developers using it early, started building with it. It is now a product. You can try it today for free in the Twilio console. If you're already a Twilio user, it's there. If you're not, it's free to sign up. And I'll give you a quick demo later of what that looks like. But as we were building this product, and as we're thinking about research, we're focused on a few key questions. And those questions are around the kind of impact of autonomous agents and AGI on the future of customer engagement, right? So we're curious, we're thinking about how will channels change? Today, as a consumer, you probably get texts, you get emails, maybe you get phone calls. What are the channels that we aren't thinking about yet, right? We're also thinking about what the role of personalization and data looks like in a world where we're maybe exclusively or mostly talking to AI, right? We're also interested as a developer-forward company, as a company that's always cared about our developer community, and specifically about APIs, which is how Twilio started. We're thinking about how APIs and the developer experience might change. So these are all the exciting questions I get to think about day to day. But today I want to focus in on a specific thing that has helped us a lot as we've been building AI assistants and as we've been thinking about AI in this space. So I'll start with a quick question. You don't have to, you can raise your hand if you want, but just think to yourself, if you went to college here in the US, did you take the SATs or maybe the ACT? And why? Imagine for a second, think about why you took that test. Probably because everybody took it and the universities required it, right? But fundamentally, SATs and other kind of standardized tests like this are meant to provide a shared framework for assessing something that's not that straightforward, right? Human intelligence is very nuanced, very hard to measure. But we need to have a shared language for how we evaluate it and how we talk about it. So we, the way that looks for a college student or a pre-college student is that we combine standardized testing with other evaluation mechanisms like the essays maybe you wrote, right, and the interviews you did with people to try and put together and paint a full picture of human intelligence. And there's a similar need for LLMs and LLM-based systems. As we're building these complex, nuanced systems, we need a way to evaluate and talk about how good they are at doing whatever they're doing. And these frameworks are called Evals, so short for evaluations. Today, I want to spend some time talking about what evals are, for those of you who maybe haven't thought about this yet or haven't encountered these, and we'll go through that. We'll talk about some things that we've learned building evals into as we build our product, how we use evals and how they've helped us, and how you might think about applying them if you're doing LLM development or if you're building agentic systems on top of LLMs. And then at the end, I'll do a quick demo of Twilio AI Assistant so you can see what we're building, and I'll also show you how we're kind of testing it today. So what are evals? I also think I noticed there's another evaluation talk at the end tonight, so hopefully you'll get kind of like a nice primer right now, and then later a deeper dive and maybe some other tooling you can use. So I think I just covered this. What are evals? They're a shared way to talk about model intelligence or model performance. Why might we do them? Well, I guess I have a more official definition here. Evals are systematic methods for assessing the performance and capabilities of LLMs. So straightforwardly, it's a way to say, is this doing what I want it to do? And why might you do it? There's a few different reasons. I think if you're, I come from a background in product engineering, web development, so I'm familiar with test-driven development, right? I think this is an interesting framework to apply on top of evals when you're thinking about LLM development. So one reason you might do that is non-regression testing, if you're building, adding things. And I'll talk tonight, you'll hear me talking both about evals can be applied at the kind of model level, right? If you're training a model or working at that fundamental level. It can also be applied if you're building on top of an LLM, and maybe you're not training the model, but you're kind of building an agentic or a system on top of a model. So we'll talk about both of those. So in the non-regression case, that might mean, is my model training well, or is the system that I'm building on top of it consistent, right? The second reason you might use evals is for leaderboards, which are exactly what they sound like. Which model is best at a specific task or a specific set of criteria? There's some good leaderboards out there. You may have seen things like the ELO system, right? There's different ways to test models and to evaluate them against each other. Capability is another reason, or suitability, which answers the question, can my model do X, right? Or can my system do X? Is it suitable for this specific type of task? And then the final reason, and I think this is an important one, and this has been what's most important for us at Twilio as we're building a system on top of LLMs, can I iterate quickly and confidently while building? I think at the end of the day, that's the most important thing we as developers get out of testing, is the ability to move fast and make changes. And at Twilio specifically, I'll tell you a little bit about how and why we use evals. We use them to reduce the risk of introducing regressions, like I mentioned, non-regression testing, in overall quality of the product that we're building. We're also looking for broken functionality in the end-to-end experience. We have users using the product. We obviously don't want to impact them if we're changing things. We are building on top of models. We are not training our own models, but this helps us, gives us a framework for comparing performance of new models or new constellations of models against what we're using today, so that we can kind of introduce those changes quickly. And then we also use evals to verify our security and safety mechanisms. So if you're doing something like testing for prompt injection or other like red teaming types of things where you're trying to test the security of your system or models, it's another great way to do that. And then we're also using evals to compare ourselves against the industry. This is another kind of leaderboard, right? We can keep track of how we're doing against similar products or similar systems. All right, that's what are evals and why you might use them. I want to talk about a couple of different types. This is a really broad term still, right? This is a broad category of testing. It essentially just means evaluating a model or a system. But what are the specific types of evals that you might encounter or might want to use? The first is automated benchmarks. And automated benchmarks are standard tests, a standard set of tests that measure an LLM or an LLM-based system on specific tasks. So this is really well suited for something like you want to know how well your model performs at a specific task. And a task in this context means something that's well-defined and concrete. So that might be something like classifying spam emails, right? You can look at an email and you can say, is this spam, yes or no? That's the task, and it's a very discrete task. So that is an example of something that automated benchmarks might do well. And the way you do that is you give your model a sample of spam and non-spam emails, right? And you give them a metric, which is 0 is like misclassified and 1 is classified correctly. And then you evaluate your model against those samples. Pretty straightforward. You say, are you doing this task well? The downsides here are the sort of cons to automated benchmarks. It's not as powerful for evaluating general capability. That's something more like, is my model good at math? That's a pretty broad question and hard to categorize into specific tasks. So this won't help you as much with that question. And it can also be problematic if your evaluations end up in a training data set. So if your model is trained on a set of data that includes the tests you're running on it, that's called contamination. And essentially your model will perform really well on the benchmarks because it's like, hey, I know the answers to this. But it won't generalize well. It won't apply those skills to other tasks that it hasn't seen before. That's also, you may have heard of overfitting, which is when a model can kind of only predict really well on its training data. So there's just some downsides to automated benchmarking, but again, it's like a pretty standard set of tests to determine if your model's good at a specific thing. The second type of evaluations we'll talk about are human evaluations. This is what it sounds like. Humans assess LLM outputs, right? You may have heard the very scientific term vibes check. I love that this is the thing. This is, does this feel right? Does this seem like the right answer? You can do this using community feedback for like a massive model ranking. You can throw it out to what's called an arena, a large group of people, kind of crowdsource responses. The downside there is there's high subjectivity. It's hard to get Reddit to follow rules, right? Or whatever, to get a big group of people to do things in a very specific way. There's a thing called wisdom of the crowd, which is like, it's a mathematical thing. This is not my area of expertise, but if you ask a bunch of people a question, I think the like sort of bell curve will hover around the answer, so that can offset some of this. So vibes check, that's like, does this feel right? You can ask a bunch of people. Another way to do human evaluation is to do systematic annotations. This is where you're giving humans who maybe you're paying a like very specific set of criteria on which to judge the output. This generally returns slightly better results. You're providing them very rigorous guidelines, but bias still exists. We're still humans at the end of the day. Using humans as judges does offset that problem where general, kind of more complex or nuanced problems are hard to measure. So more complex topics are a little easier to answer with this, like, is my model good at math? Or maybe, is my model good at poetry, right? That's a very human question. But it does correlate well with human preference, which sometimes is what we're trying to train the models to do, right? So if you are trying to train a model to do something that humans will like, this may be a good eval method for you. If you're trying to do something where you're training your model to do something that is right or wrong or has a very specific set of guidelines, this may not be the best choice. This can also be expensive, obviously, and it can reinforce or embed biases into that model evaluation. So some important things to consider. And the last thing we'll talk about is LLMs as judges. So if we take the humans out and put it in LLM as the thing evaluating the output, that's our last sort of option here. And for when you're thinking about using LLMs as judges, I think it's valuable to think about using You have to decide whether you're going to use a more general model or if you're going to use a very smaller specialized model that's specifically trained in whatever task you're trying to evaluate. It's less expensive, but this does kind of tend to act a little unpredictably and doesn't always correlate well with human preference. So again, if you are using an LLM as a judge and it has terrible taste in poetry, you're probably not going to get a great poetry model. These are 3 broad categories of types of evaluations to consider if you're thinking about how do I test my LLM or my model, or how do I test my kind of LLM-based system. All right, that's the high level. I want to dive in a little and look at some ways you can actually implement right now. Tomorrow you can go to work or wherever, you can actually start adding some evals to your system or to your model process. And we will go through kind of level 1, 2, and 3, which is the easiest, fastest to kind of hardest, most expensive ways to implement some evals. And I'll tell you along the way kind of how at Twilio we've implemented these things or where we're using these processes. Also, note this graphic, this image, is pulled from Hamel Hussein's blog, a blog post about evals. I think it's called Why Your LLM System Needs Evals. It's linked in my resources slide. I must give credit where credit is due. He has some excellent content on evals and broadly testing. Recommend checking it out. And much of this is borrowed from him. All right. So level 1 of adding evaluations to your system is unit tests. Just like, again, if we're coming back to test-driven development or to application testing, same concept. Unit tests, I'll go through 1, 2, and 3, and then we'll, come back and talk about each one. The second level to add evaluations at is model and human evaluation. So like we were talking about, kind of those second pieces where you're using a judge, whether a human or another LLM, to evaluate the output of your responses. And then finally, the third level of evaluations for a more mature kind of complex system down the line when you have a product and you have people using it is A/B testing, good old A/B testing. Because at the end of the day, understanding how your users react to a change gives you a ton of information. So let's jump back and think about unit tests. What are unit tests in the context of LLM evaluation or model evaluation? They are, I think, the same thing you might expect if you've done unit testing on code before. It's just a little less programmatic. Unit tests are things that will run fast and cheap, and you should run them on every change. This means if you're training your model and you're making changes in that way, you want to run your unit tests to, again, kind of determine non-regression and make sure that you're not introducing breaking changes. If you're making changes to your prompting or to your system that surrounds your LLM, these should also run on every change, and they should be fast to do for that reason. A good way to think about this is to break down what you're testing into features and scenarios, kind of small scoped tasks, again, like small yes or no answer questions, and use that as the basis for what your unit test suite looks like. And you can use an LLM to generate your test cases. Don't be afraid to do so. If you have a very clear outline for what your test cases should look like, and you just need a ton of them, that's a good way to do it. And I think the best thing to do here is to set your bar, which this is important. Your bar doesn't have to be 100%, right? I think this is a difference between testing code and testing a model or testing an LLM. In code, generally, we want everything to work exactly as expected because it is programmatic, it's deterministic. For an LLM system, it may be that if it works 90% of the time, that's decent, that's good enough for you, right? Because it is non-deterministic, it's going to change every time. It's up to you where that bar lies and up to your sort of tolerances for your users and your product. But when you decide what that bar is, you should set it, you should run those tests, evaluate, and then you can either change your tests if your bar is maybe too high or too low, or you can you can know that you've broken something or changed something in a way that does not support your bar. All right, that's unit testing. The second type of testing, so that's the easiest, cheapest to add, right? Next is model and human evaluation. And I'll talk at the end about the frameworks that we're using to do this. So I forgot, at Twilio we are doing unit testing. Today we use an open source framework called PromptFoo, which I'll show you an example of later. But there's lots of good tools out there for doing this. And I have some resources in my that I'll share at the end as well. All right. The second type of evaluation you might add is that model and human evaluation. Again, this is a little more expensive, so this is something you want to consider when the stakes are a little higher. If you're really early in development, it may not make sense to start doing this early on. Some important things to think about as you're starting to think about adding model and human evaluation is that you need, if you want somebody or something to look at your output, you have to log it somewhere. So ensure that you're logging your traces so that your human or model can actually evaluate those, right? Log your conversations. And you can start by letting humans grade them. In order to do that, you need to decrease the friction for looking at data. So make your traces easy to look at, easy to find. There are tools for doing this. You could build something yourself, but that's an important piece. And then introducing an evaluator model allows you to automate some of that testing, right? Again, humans' time is obviously expensive. If you introduce an evaluating model, you can automate some of that testing. And then it's important you can track the correlation. So if your human is always doing one thing and your model is always doing another, there's a misalignment, right? And you're not going to get good results out of that. So decide how much you can rely on that automatic evaluation or modify your LLM-based evaluation to more closely correlate with your human evaluation. Yep, all right. That's 1, 2, 3. And the final piece, which is for more mature products, I would say, because it's more expensive, it relies on a user base, is starting to run A/B tests and experiment on LLM output. This is classic scientific method, right? Start with a problem statement, hypothesize, bucket your users, segment your users into groups, and run experiments. For example, by introducing X, we expect to observe an increase or decrease in Y. This is a great way to really get real user feedback, right? Even unbiased, because they're doing it without telling you the feedback. And so you can kind of see what levers you have to impact your user experience. And today at Twilio, I keep forgetting this piece, we are doing some model and human evaluation, and I'll show you what that looks like in our testing framework. We are not doing A/B testing today on our AI assistance product. We're still a burgeoning product, small user base. So one day I hope to, but we're not doing that yet. If you are, I'm interested to hear about it. All right. As you're introducing evals, I think some things to strive for can be helpful. Some general concepts to keep in mind to what to work towards as you start to introduce evaluations. The first is diverse metrics. So we talked about a bunch of different types of evals to run. You should do as many of them as you reasonably can. And this gives you a full picture of how your model or how your system is performing against that user feedback and against a model's evaluation as well. Second, contextual relevance is really important. You want to make sure that you're actually testing for things that you want to happen, right? Tests are not valuable if they're testing for scenarios that you don't actually care about or might not actually happen in the real world. So ensure that you're thinking about contextual relevance. This is the same as with, I think, application development. And then finally, transparency and ease of use. At the end of the day, we are still building for humans mostly, so it's important that humans can use your system. So whatever you choose to use to build evals or to write your own evals, make sure that they're easy to access, easy to understand, well documented. That's just my evergreen development advice. Cool. Okay, that is my big picture. Emily's thoughts, taken again from many sources, all of whom I appreciate and who I've linked in my resources slide so that you can read more about evals. I want to take a moment and dive into a quick demo of Twilio AI Assistants so that you can see what that product looks like and what we're building. And then I'll show you our testing framework, again, which is built on top of an open source tool called PromptFoo. Their team is great. We've had a great time working with them. There's tons of good eval frameworks out there and more coming every day. So let me pull up. I think I did not prepare my windows correctly, so you'll have to bear with me for a moment again. Whoops. Working on multiple screens. Okay. I am actually now going to mirror. We're going to go back to a mirror. Oh, before I do that, I guess, let me give you a quick intro. So Twilio AI Assistants, like I mentioned, we are a customer engagement platform at Twilio. And so we think a lot about how businesses engage with customers. AI Assistants is an opinionated framework for building and hosting AI agents specifically for customer-facing use cases. So this is where we're kind of living, is thinking about what are the specific problems and the specific cases that you might run into if you're trying to deploy AI agents to customers as a business. AI Assistants, if you've worked with kind of AI agent platforms at all, these things will not be unfamiliar to you, but our tool solves problems autonomously with tools and knowledge, so we have the ability for you to add API interfaces for your agent to call, as well as to upload knowledge. We do the kind of RAG pipeline on our end so that you don't have to worry about data management. We also allow you to use your existing customer data. You may have heard of Twilio Segment, which is a customer data platform where you are able to collect and clean and aggregate data from across all your interactions with your users, whether that's on your website or your mobile app or marketing emails. And that Segment CDP becomes a really rich set of customer data. And so your AI assistants can actually leverage that customer data to personalize interactions with the user. And then finally, AI Assistants, because we're Twilio, engages with your customers how they prefer. Our assistants are omni-channel, which means they work on SMS, WhatsApp, voice, email, all of the channels you can think of today that you can already build with Twilio. So that's AI Assistants. We're going to dive in and see it, which will take me just a moment. Hopefully I'm logged in. All right, if you have played with Twilio before or built with Twilio before, you'll be hopefully maybe familiar with this console. This is the Twilio console. AI Assistants is, again, available to anybody from the console. You'll have to search for it if you've never used it before. And you get 100 messages per month free, so that's kind of the development budget, so that you can start to play and iterate and build an assistant without getting charged, obviously. And then after that, there's some pricing, which you can take a look at. If you're looking to build for a production use case, our team is always happy to talk to you. Again, we're still pretty early in the product life cycle of this product, so we are here to hold your hand if you want us to. I'm going to jump over, and we're going to look at an assistant I built called Schubert, which is a retail example. So let's say I am the owner of a friendly shoe store, and I wanted to introduce an AI agent onto my retail website and maybe also across channels so that my customers could text or email or go to my website and talk to my AI agent about what type of shoes they should buy. So Schubert is just a fun pun. That's the inspiration for this whole thing. We use a concept called AI constellations. Again, I mentioned we're not training our own models. We are building on top of existing models. We think that our expertise, there are many very smart people doing great model work. We think that our expertise is sort of taking and using those models. But the constellation concept allows us to potentially build together multiple models that can call out to each other, that are orchestrated under the hood to solve for specific use cases or tasks. So we're going to use just the standard one. I have a little personality prompt here. This is kind of your basic prompt engineering space where I'm telling my assistant who it is, and broadly what its voice should kind of be, what personality it should take, and then maybe some very specific rules. You'll see here I'm giving it some clear guidance on how to interact with customers. Customer memory is that piece where your agent, your assistant can actually integrate with Twilio Segment. And so customer memory allows you to do two things. It can pull data from Segment, which is things you already know about your customer. So it can it can welcome them by name, let's say, talk to them about their interests, things that it already knows. And the AI perception engine allows your assistant, as it's having that conversation with your customer, to actually infer relevant data about the customer and save it back to the Segment profile. So in the shoe case, for example, if I'm a customer and I'm on the website and I'm talking to Schubert, the AI agent, and I say, I'm running a marathon next year, I'm a big marathon runner. That's relevant to a shoe store, right? The shoe store might want to know that I'll be buying a lot of running shoes in the next year. So my AI agent will infer that that's an important detail, save it back to my customer profile. I'm going to speed up. I think I'm not missed when we started, but I think I am almost at time. So I'm going to move quickly through the rest of this so I can show you the Eval platform, and then we'll have maybe a minute for questions. Like I mentioned, we have the ability for you to build tools into your AI assistant. Tools are similar to webhooks, designed to give your assistant the ability to take action or perform tasks. So I have a couple pre-built ones here. My assistant can place an order by making a call out to an order management system, can fetch an order, it can do a discount code, things like this. The description describes when and how my assistant should use this tool. This is all passed to the underlying model as part of the prompt and context. And so these are kind of some interesting places to play. I definitely recommend getting in and just trying it out. You also define what the input schema to that endpoint should look like, and the assistant infers, based on the conversation, how to fill that in or what information to ask for on top of that. That's tools. Knowledge, I mentioned. You can upload documents, you can provide websites, things like this. You don't have to think about chunking and embedding and managing a RAG pipeline. We do that on the back end, and it makes knowledge management a little bit easier, I think. And then channels, as I mentioned, you can deploy your assistant to multiple channels, including messaging, and as of tomorrow, voice, which is exciting. All right. With that, I'm going to, just for the sake of time, I will not dive into the simulator, and we won't get into a whole conversation. Simulator is the way for you as a developer to kind of test from the UI, test with your assistant, and it allows you to see what the assistant is doing, what tools it's using, and how it's kind of interacting under the hood. All right, but before we do, or instead of doing that, I want to show you what an example of this is a prompt foo config file. We provide a package that has some helper methods for sort of testing your Twilio AI assistant specifically, and so I'm building with that here. And this is an example. It's YAML. It's not that pretty to look at or fun to read, but it is the way that I am defining my tests, my evals. So I have a few unit tests here, which I've called out, and essentially you define the prompt. In this case, I'm saying, ahoy, I just want to see what happens when I say hi to my agent, and I expect that my agent should respond with a greeting. So you're able to test here on like deterministic values rather than saying, does the agent say hi back? I'm just saying I expect my response to have one of these three values. So this is a good example of like a fast, quick, deterministic unit test. And then we also have some helper methods for testing tools and knowledge. So for example, here I am testing that this tool, we'll look at this one, that it used a tool. So for example, if I say to my agent, I want these high heels in a size 6, and I'd like them in red. Here's my shipping address. I give it all the details that it needs. I expect it to use that place order tool. So this is probably, it is still a unit test because I'm testing like a specific piece of functionality, but it's a little more complex than that kind of deterministic hi, hello. And then we also provide some convenience methods for running tests that use an LLM as a judge. So again, when we talked about that model and human evaluation, this is a way that you can do some model evaluation. And that's the LLM rubric type here. And so essentially the prompt is what's going to our AI assistant, to the Twilio AI assistant. And then the assertion, the value of the assertion, is to the testing model, the judge. And I'm saying to that judge model, does this response indicate that you can return a pair of shoes within 30 days of purchase? And my model will decide whether it does or doesn't. We can just run these and see what happens as our grand finale. And while they're running, I will tell you how you can, we'll check back on that in just a second, what to do next. So if you scan this QR code, it should take you to a Google Doc that has a list of links to these slides, some other eval frameworks, prompt foo, and it's also, there's a way to click through and start building with AI assistants today. I'm always happy to hear from you. There's also a way to connect with me. Unfortunately, I have to jump out right after I get off stage today, but please reach out with your thoughts, questions, what you're building. I love to hear about what people are building. Let's check on those tests and see how it went, if they're done. Hey, 5 successes, 0 failures. And you can see again with prompt foo, which is the platform we're using here, or the tool, it sort of lays out the prompt, the run ID, which is just like which run was it, session, if I indicated a session ID, and then the pass, which is the response from the agent that it's either evaluating or that it is evaluating. That is my time. I think maybe we have a couple minutes for questions. Thank you so much for being here and for coming out and for learning together. Again, please connect with me. Always happy to hear about what you're building.
And thank you for the presentation, Emily. It was great. So we have time for maybe 2 or 3 questions. So do I have any takers? No? No one? Yes.
Hi, thank you for the talk. Very useful and interesting. I was curious about the AI constellation orchestration. How does it work? Do you make it in-house, or do you use some services that we can check out?
Yeah, great question. So today, the way we build our AI constellations is all done in-house. We're not using any specific tools. And in fact, it's still a pretty simple problem because we haven't branched out into more complex constellations yet. So all our constellations today all are based primarily on GPT-4o. We're still using singular model constellations for today. But we recently are doing things like we've just made a big improvement to a new constellation which is specific for use cases where you have a lot of knowledge. And the way that we're doing that is essentially we're building some prompting around that underlying model that instead of doing a lookup on your knowledge based on the prompt, whatever question the user has asked it, it actually does a pre-index. It like checks into each knowledge source before the user's question comes in and understands what's in each knowledge source. So it's more useful if you have very nuanced knowledge sources where it's like maybe they're dependent on different locations and you want your kind of prompting model to have a sense of what's in each of those knowledge sources before before the user even asks the question. So that's kind of one example of a way that we're using constellations to improve our strategies. But to your question about orchestration, today it's not super complex yet, but if you connect with me, I'm always happy to talk more about it, and I'll keep you posted if we launch any new constellations that are doing more interesting orchestration under the hood. Thank you.
Nice. Any other question? Yes? Okay, this is going to be the last one.
Hey, I'm wondering if you had any experience writing tests to detect hallucinations. And if you have, if you can talk about that.
Yeah, good question. I personally have not grappled with this too much yet, but I know that the team has. And I think one learning that they ran into was specifically for hallucinations, I think the best way to get around that is to do unit testing that's very deterministic. So for example, you need to understand that there is or is not a specific piece of information in the output. So you're not judging the quality of the output, you're literally judging yes or no, binary, is there the right data in this response? So that's kind of the most useful way to evaluate whether something is hallucinating. So that falls into the unit testing category, I would say. It's more deterministic. And then human testing, of course, is at the end of the day, the best way. Model evaluation, I've found, and I think I've heard from the team, is not always that useful for hallucination control. Because you're kind of you're adding another layer of potential hallucination, right? And Twilio's stance as our team, the emerging tech and innovation team, is that hallucinations are not entirely preventable, and that you need to build for a world where you're prepared to deal with them. And so I think evals are a really good way to kind of do that, to build in some non-regression testing to make sure that you're determining whether the information that you want is actually in the output. That was a lot of words to say. I don't think we've found the right answer yet, but it's a really interesting problem. And I think human evaluation at the end of the day is still the best way.
Hi, tiny follow-up to this question.
Yeah.
You said to find hallucinations, you do very deterministic unit tests. Would it make sense to run them a lot of times then? For each of them? Yeah,
I do think
that's what you do?
Yeah, I think that type of test is valuable to run every time you make a change. Oh, yes. Yeah. And that's where you're deciding what your bar is. So yes, if you're running the same test 100 times, or X number of times, decide you may see hallucinations some percentage of that time, and deciding where that bar is. But yes, definitely. Running the same test multiple times can actually be useful in a non-deterministic world. Yeah.
Cool. Okay,
Awesome.
Let's give Emily a round of applause. Thank you so much,
Thanks,
Emily.
everybody.
next in line gonna be Gokhan.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here, and thanks, Emily, for the great presentation. For sure. All good. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about Brainbase, and I'm going to talk about our API, which we usually don't talk too much. We're an enterprise product, so we usually talk to non-technical people in companies to do the sales. So this will be a fun change of pace for us. Before we get into that, I'll talk a little bit about myself. So I'm the founder and CEO of Brainbase. Brainbase is a YCW24 company. We started it in January 2024, so this time last year. Before that, I was a PhD student at Harvard working on machine learning and computer vision, which I've dropped out of to start Brainbase. And Brainbase actually, as I'll talk more, depends and comes from sort of my research that I've done during my PhD. But yeah, we can get started with that. And keep in mind, my presentation will most likely be a little shorter. Feel free to come in with questions. Feel free to come in during the presentation. If it's a short question, I'll answer it. If not, I'll answer it at the end. But please feel free to ask questions. All right. So I don't know how many of you were paying attention to the CES 2025, but one of the quotes that stood out was Jensen's quote that the IT department of every company is essentially going to be the HR department AI agent. So we keep hearing about this AI agent situation. So this was a nice kind of refreshing take on that. And what that means for every company is that the CIO, the chief IT officer, is going to be the most important role in the company by the end of 2025. So this is also confirmed by sort of Sam Altman, who is saying, so obviously as everyone knows, is the CEO of OpenAI, has said that AI agents finally in this year that has been talked a lot is going to materialize and have actual productivity benefits that are going to be seen in enterprises. So as I was making the slide, we saw that, Operator from OpenAI has got announced. So, they're kind of talking the talk and walking the walk, which is good to see. So if you guys haven't played around with it, play around with it. It's pretty interesting. But yeah, so the idea is AI agents will be common as our workmates by 2026. So if you look at kind of what the situation is in a company today, what happens is all of these departments go to HR or go to whoever the people and kind of the sourcing part of the company is, and whenever they need some workforce, they go ahead and ask them, can I get some SDRs? Can I get some, devs? Can I get this people? Can I get this people? This is what I need to handle our workload. So we are seeing very rapidly that this is turning into IT essentially being where this is gatekept and this is supplied. So this is essentially where we come in. So Brainbase at its core is a first of its kind EAP, which is a term that we use to denote an enterprise agent platform. What that means is we go into companies and we set up a central platform for them to be able to create agents, numerous agents for every department. So they can create agents from sales to marketing to customer support to ops, so whatever you need. One thing we don't do currently is devs, but anything other than that, we will most likely have a template and a worker that has been created on us. So this is kind of what it looks like at its core. So our system creates an agent. So there are requests from sales, HR, ops, wherever they come. This turns into an agent which then gets customized with your connections, your third-party apps, and also gets to connect to your internal APIs. This is then deployed to any channel that you might think. So kind of echoing what Emily said, the core idea that we're seeing going into 2025 is that we want the same agent available on any channel that you might interact with it or your customers might interact with it. So you create your agent from your templates, customize your agent by connecting it, and then you deploy that same agent to any channel. So this is the idea. So State of the Union right now, we have customers from government agencies to hospital groups to airlines, all the way to Fortune 500 companies that have joined us in the first year of operation. And so far, we've seen that Brainbase has allowed them to go from idea to production 83% faster and has saved the equivalent of $97 million in workforce costs in 2024 and 2025. So, but today, as a dev audience, I'll kind of stop there and talk about something a little bit more interesting, which is, of all this talk about agents, kind of what is it that makes an agent? What do we call an agent? What is the constituents of it? So we think about this a lot in Brainbase, and we think of it in the form of the Brainbase diamond, which is we call it. But it's kind of something that has 4 components. These 4 components are a database, documents, integrations, and intelligence. So we have since saw that any agent that is being used in production, any agent that's being used right now, essentially boils down to these 4 components. So to go through these one by one, essentially an agent needs a database, a structured database where it can write data to. It needs documents, either for context or to be able to read from it. So this is the part where you do RAG, this is the part where you vectorize. It needs integrations, so it needs some ability to interact with the tools that it needs, because if you're going to be booking tickets, you need Google, you need some form of application that you interface with, or if you're in an enterprise setting, you need something like Salesforce or Workday that your agent is actually able to interact with. And finally, at the end of the day, we obviously need intelligence, which is coming from the LLM. So what we're seeing a lot right now out in the wild is that this is kind of all 4 of these components separately are sort of figured out. So your database, your documents, your integrations, your intelligence, there's not much play around any of these components singularly. So OpenAI supplies the intelligence, database and unstructured database are pretty common, and then we just have the integrations that we build and every company builds. So the more interesting question that we find when you try to get these into production is, how do you actually connect these 4 components together for them to work? So you have this system, you have all these 4 components, and you put them in a bag, but there needs to be something. The thing that is missing is something that makes all 4 of these work. And a lot of the time we see that people think the LLM itself is this binding tissue, but the moment you try to put that in production, the moment you try to put just an LLM into production with all these 4 components, you see that it fails pretty miserably. So I'm sure you've seen examples of production and even deployment agents that kind of sell people cars for $1 or even worse. So the main thing that this is coming from, the main reason for this in terms of a dev experience is, if you've ever tried to create an agent using OpenAI LLM or any other LLM, this is sort of the problem you run into in doing this. So assume that you're trying to create an agent with OpenAI API. So this is kind of the standard Python SDK. Then let's try to add streaming to this. So a couple more lines. And then let's make it a conversation so that it can talk to people. So let's give it the ability to search Google now. So this is, with one tool, we've gone into such a complex implementation of the system that needs to be done by every person deploying an LLM. So, and the worst part is we haven't actually even deployed this yet to any kind of production environment, any kind of server. And this is a very simplified version of what happens in a production setting where you need to get something out that is going to actually take customer calls, it's going to be able to take requests from people, requests from your internal team. So what we've figured out here, what we've realized is that we need actually a way of creating AI agents that is stateful, so meaning AI agents are able to refer to previous runs that they have done. So this can be in the same run, in the same session. If they've Googled some research and actually have found some things and now they have to write about them, they need to have a direct way of accessing that information. They need to be serverless so that you can deploy them as easily as today you're able to deploy a website or something like a Lambda on AWS if you're familiar with those. And finally, the most important part of this is that they need to be reliable. So this is something that kind of is swept under the rug until you try to get something in production. But a lot of the time when you're working in an enterprise setting, when you're dealing with customers, unlike what you might want to do on ChatGPT and all the cool demos, you actually want your systems to be pretty deterministic. And that kind of echoes the human experience. So if you have a customer-facing agent, a human agent in a company, they are usually trained to be standard and to kind of work in a deterministic manner. And that is something that is very hard to bring to AI when you allow the AI to make decisions at every step. If you allow the AI to pick every time if it's going to Google or if it's going to send an email, then we see that it ends up sort of failing a lot of the time. So one thing that we want to put in here that doesn't just make for good demos, but actually good production agents, is that it needs to be deterministic in a way. So the core of our product, what this brings us to, is the language that we've created to do this. So this is the part that's coming from my PhD research. And what we've seen is deploying an agent, deploying an AI system into production, there needs to be a way where an LLM can take actions natively, and these agents can be provisioned in a systematic way. So to do that, we've developed what we call the base language, which we call the assembly language of AI agents. So this is a first version of a class of languages we call the AIML, the Agentic Instruction Markdown Language. And I can show you here what that looks like. So the code that we've had before, you can do that in these 5 lines. So this you can think of as what replaces the text prompt that goes into your agent. So instead of putting a text prompt into your agent and then having to create all the peripherals outside of that, now you're able to call this agent with just these 5 lines that has the Google search functionality, has the functionality of system prompting, has the functionality of conversation, and this is what gets deployed to the AI agent. And the way you deploy it is also very, very easy. So now you just deploy it with these 4 lines, and the really nice part is you can actually go ahead and deploy this to a lot of places with just another line. So this code here will go ahead and deploy this over voice, over Slack, over WhatsApp, over Zoom, over Teams, wherever we support, and we increase support for that all the time. So here, for the demo, let's see one of these agents in production. So I'll go ahead and call one of our numbers that has one of the agents that have been created with this system. And hopefully you'll be able to hear it.
Thank you for calling Long Hyundai. My name is Alex. Please note this call is being recorded to ensure you are having an excellent customer experience. Are you calling to schedule a service appointment or check the status of your vehicle?
Hey, hey Alex, I have a check engine light on. Is there anything you can help with that?
Absolutely, I can help with that. Just to confirm, your phone number is 617-901-1508 and your name is Gokhan Egri, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Great. I see you. The 2015 Toyota Tacoma. Is this the vehicle you'd like to schedule the engine diagnosis for?
Yes, for the Toyota Tacoma, correct.
Perfect. For the engine diagnosis, we recommend dropping off your vehicle for the day. Would you like to book an appointment for this?
Yes, please. Can I book something 3 Fridays from now? Alex?
I found some available slots for 3 Fridays from now. The earliest available time is 8 a.m. on January 31st. Would you like to book that time?
No. Is there anything later in that day?
Sure thing. On January 31st, I have a slot at 11:15 a.m. Does that work for you?
Yeah, but I don't have I don't have anyone to pick me up. Is there any chance to get a loaner?
We don't offer loaners, but we can provide a shuttle service through Uber within 20 miles of the dealership. Would you like to use that option?
Yeah, Uber sounds great.
Awesome. Let's confirm the details. Appointment for an engine diagnosis on your 2015 Toyota Tacoma scheduled for January 31st at 11:15 a.m. transportation via Uber. Does everything look good?
Yeah, everything looks great. Let's book it.
Please wait a few seconds while I book your appointment for January 31st at 11:15 a.m.
Can you also tell me the address of the dealership so that I know that I'm dropping it off at the correct place?
Your appointment is all set for January 31st at 11:15 a.m. The dealership's address is 6035 International Drive, Chattanooga, Tennessee, 37421. If you have any more questions, feel free to ask.
Thanks, Alex. Have a great day. So this is a system that took about 30 to 40 lines of base code and has been deployed to voice chat as well as web chat for the Hyundai dealership that's taking hundreds of actual customer calls every day, which is one of our many, many dealerships that is actually using this in production. So one of these days when you call an airline or a dealership or a hospital, you'll most likely be talking to one of our systems, and hopefully you enjoy it. So with that, I'll kind of leave some time for questions, but currently our API is on waitlist, and you're able to go ahead and request access to it and tell us kind of what you'd like to build with it and you know, what you'd like to see next. But yeah, with that, I'd love to answer some questions.
Great, thanks, Gokhan. Yeah, you can give a round of applause. Cool. So do we have questions for Gokhan? Yes.
Yeah, so like the rest of the code, like, so you just made an appointment, and I'm part of that code, I'm guessing, makes that, you allow that agent to make that appointment, or how does that work at that point?
Yes, exactly. So basically what happens, great question. So in that code, we made the system be able to connect to the internal APIs of the dealership. So in the call that we just made, essentially there was a lot of parts of it that were kind of moving together. So the first part was, if you kind of caught it, it was able to get my information from my number based on their internal API. So it was able to do that in conjunction with, you know, talking to me in the background. So that's something that the language allows. And then when I asked it to book an appointment, when it got the availabilities for the days, those were all calls that it's making with the correct parameters and the correct way of calling to their internal APIs.
And so your state that you're keeping there, like, it's like, I'm guessing you're requesting for confirmation, and so you have like a whole list of things that the agent is allowed to do.
Yes, exactly. And that's the nice thing about kind of doing it in the way of the base language rather than in an OpenAI API. So in the OpenAI API or any LLM API, what you get to do is you essentially get to just put a system prompt in, hoping that the system will follow it. So you can, when it's a detailed long workflow, you put a lot of information that then the agent does not follow reliably. Here, that's the deterministic part of the workflow that I was talking about. So here we make it in bits where every time, you know, it gets my information, it confirms my information, it goes to the next step. And that gives it a lot more reliability to be able to follow that smaller step. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. But let's say we're talking to the agent and we're asking, well, what can you do for me? Would she give you a menu of all the different things that she's capable of doing at that point?
Yes.
And then how much is it actually code-based versus, you know, like it's like an LL, like it's something like a YAML or something where you said it like,
So a lot of it is, so basically anything that's not a system prompt is code-based. So there's nothing else that goes into the system other than the base code and the deployment itself. So the idea is that you can make it into something, so you can have the base code configured in a way that fully is on parity with the OpenAI LLM. That would mean you put your entire system prompt in the talk section, and then you just put all of your function calls in the untils, and that kind of is what OpenAI gives you. Or you can nest these loops saying, you know, after you've confirmed, then go into this new section where, you know, you have that information that's been confirmed already, so now your system prompt is this different thing, and you're trying to get them to, you know, book a call or book an appointment or do something else. So that's something that you determine, which is something that's very good to have if you're a customer, if you're an enterprise, and you want to have full control over the system.
And just one last question. What is the actual language that you guys are writing in, or is it?
So this base language is a markdown language that we built on top of Python. So it's the language that uses very similar to the Python syntax, but it runs on an interpreter that we built that is designed around kind of the base language. So we have a lot of designators like loop untils, whenevers, etc. That, you know, we built an interpreter for to kind of interpret into a system.
Great. Yeah. Thank you.
For sure.
Thank you for the demo. It's very exciting to see. Can you go to the next slide after this? I think, this one where you talked about deploying. Do you only offer deploying to the cloud, or is there a way to run that script that you showed earlier locally on like your local instance or a self-hosted type of
Yes, so self-hosted. So basically when I do worker.run, this is a great question. So when I do this, it's basically just self-hosted. So in this, when I do worker.run without passing anything in, it gets you to a conversation on the terminal when you feed in a WebSocket or something else in the run function, which in the docs you can see, then you're able to do it on your terminal. But this allows you, you're able to do it on your local server. When you do deploy voice, etc., that's when it goes out to our cloud, our managed deployments, that you can start talking to it over the voice. So you can do this entire development on your local machine. Yeah. For sure.
This is super cool. I'm so into this. I was curious, like security-wise, because you've given this agent access to your whole customer database, and at the first part, like when she was like, are you the one with the 2015 Toyota Tacoma? Like at that point, like how would you prevent you from being like, no, I'm, and having it dig into.
Great question. Great question. Then that's one of the nice things about being able to do this deterministic action. So you're able to say, if the person has not confirmed, so in the actual production version, if I didn't confirm, it would transfer me to a live agent, a human agent. So that is the behavior that we want to be deterministic. So if you tell the agent in the system prompt, if they don't confirm, put them to a live agent, 90% of the time it'll follow it. 10% of the time, someone will be able to say there's someone else and kind of continue with the system. So that's the exact behavior you can't have. That's why we have this system in a way where it can use deterministic functions. So you'll be able to put an if statement here that says, if this happens, if they don't confirm, put them to a live agent.
Gotcha. But it's still on, so it's kind of on, it falls on the user to make sure that it, like it's, right, like it's I mean.
So that part is as secure as an API call. So here in this call, what it does is it makes an API call by checking my number. So that it didn't, so if you were to call, it wouldn't ask you if you're Gokhan Egri with Toyota Tacoma. That's doing it because I've called this number before and it has saved me in this database with my phone number. So when you call, it would not tell you it would not check if you were Gokhan Egri. It would say, you don't have an account. Would you like to create an account? After that, the next time you call it, it would tell you your name and say, do you confirm? So the security vulnerability there is the exact same amount that you would get from, the risk there is what happens if the API call returns false, which is a risk that's shared by not just AI agents and, all web systems, and it's pretty secure.
Hi. Great demo. Did I hear you correctly? You asked for an appointment 3 Fridays from now.
Yes.
And she gave you an appointment for next Friday.
Oh, I didn't realize that. I can check that. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is correct.
Well, that's the point of a live demo, I guess. But yeah, we can definitely check that. But yeah, this is the actual number, so I don't know what happened there if it heard me wrong. But yeah, that's the idea. I probably wouldn't have confirmed it. So at the end, I didn't actually listen to what it was saying, and I didn't confirm it. Sorry, I went ahead and confirmed it.
But great demo.
All right, cool. Last question.
Great demo. I have a question about the thousands of legacy voice response, front-end menu, phone customer service, the bank, the airlines. Do you have any plans to cookbook a repeatable process for converting from the legacy using your assembly language and building a business on just migrations?
So if I understand the question correctly, so you're asking if we have a line of business in the company where we take kind of agencies that are legacy, these could be staffing agencies, could be call centers, BPOs, and kind of AI transform them. Yes, that is correct. So that is one of the business lines that we go with.
Do you have plans to publish a cookbook?
By cookbook, what do you mean?
For developers to use?
Yes. So we will be releasing docs. So at the moment, what we do is we will onboard people with the teams that we talk to. So as we were establishing kind of the docs and making it more developer friendly, we've essentially established kind of the walkthroughs and the quick starts and all that. But so far, all of our customers have been people that we've onboarded onto the system and given them the docs privately. So one of the reasons that we have the QR code at the end with the wait list is that we are, at the moment, kind of gearing up to opening it to developers who they'll be able to then go ahead. One thing I should probably add is we also have an agency system. So people can apply to us to become agencies that do this AI transformation, and they are able to put a lot of margin on it. We've had a lot of people make a lot of money off it during 2024. So if that's something anyone's interested in getting these to other companies, feel free to reach out.
Okay, thank you so much. We have to move on, but Gokhan will be here during networking. Thank you, Gokhan.
Hello, hello.